What's up?
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. Tonight we have foundation cracks. We're going to go over types, structural implications, and how to communicate to the client. Tonight, Stan Bajerski is going to be presenting. We also have our other owner here, Scott Monafort, who I'm sure will be joining in. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. And then if you are not participating, make sure that you are muted so that we don't get any feedback. I'll hand it over to Stan.
Hey guys, thanks for attending tonight, guys and gals. I first want to just make a quick comment. In the 38 years that I've been in the home inspection business, probably 35 of them, I was a member of some type of organization, ASHI in the beginning, and then the Connecticut Association of Home Inspectors. And I bring this up because I was able to rub elbows with a bunch of home inspectors, some veterans, some brand new. And the benefit to that is hearing war stories and finding out what the new guys are having trouble with. And little did I know in the beginning that I would be helping people out at the end of my career. But I know that cracks in foundations were difficult for new home inspectors. And it took them a while to get used to it. So we're going to go over the characteristics of cracks to help people. The veterans probably got everything down pat as to what they look for, and but some of the newer guys and gals may need to study it a little bit more and take away some of this when they go to their home inspections and decipher what they're seeing. So across all 5 states, the Home Inspectors Foundation inspection is primarily a visual inspection of readily accessible and observable structural components. The inspector is generally inspected to observe and report on the foundation or structural components, describe and identify foundation material where required, report the visible defects, limitations, and recommend further evaluation when the condition is outside of the inspector's scope or when additional investigation is needed. The common limitations are also very similar. The inspector is not performing an engineering or architectural service, is not required to determine structural capacity or adequacy, is not required to identify concealed or latent defects, and is not required to damage finishes or move obstructions to access concealed components. Please see your own state's SOPs for detailed information. Probably not going to be too much more detailed than that. What we're going to cover today are poured concrete foundations, concrete block foundations, stone and brick, and slab foundations. Foundation cracks are among the most common conditions identified during a residential home inspection, and some are minor and cosmetic. Others indicate movement, settlement, water intrusion, or structural concern. So the emphasis on a visual inspection, its limitations, the reporting language, and professional client communication. Don't forget, you can freak somebody out over a hairline crack, depending on how you're going to talk about it. So it's really important to give them the proper expectations of what you're looking at. So we're going to identify crack types, recognizing common foundation crack patterns found during residential inspections, understand the differences, distinguish between shrinkage, settlement, lateral movement, and displacement cracks, recognize warning signs. That would be identifying conditions suggesting structural movement or water intrusion, and evaluate concern level, assess the crack location with pattern, displacement, and surrounding conditions, communicate what you find clearly, write the narrative for this, including your observation and implication, recommendation, and limitation language, and recommend further evaluation by a foundation contractor, structural engineer, or waterproofing contractor when appropriate. So why do foundation cracks matter? Well, first of all, when people see cracks, most of them are a little bit taken aback, right? So you're probably going to have to look at it yourself and figure out where you think you stand on a matter and then convey that information to your clients. So foundation cracks often create anxiety for buyers. A small crack can make a client fear major structural failure, while a serious crack can be overlooked if the inspector doesn't understand the warning sign. So it's really up to us to put things into perspective. If you're viewing this as a pre-recorded webinar, your viewing code is FCH8281. The home inspector's job is not to diagnose every crack with certainty. The job is to observe, report, explain the significance, and recommend further evaluation when conditions exceed the scope of the visual inspection. Document visible conditions accurately, describe findings clearly and professionally, advise appropriate next steps when needed. Foundation crack evaluations depend partly on the type of foundation being inspected. Poured concrete is a very popular foundation material. Common in newer homes, the cracks may be vertical, diagonal, horizontal, or near corners, windows, form ties, or penetrations. Concrete block, not so popular anymore in new construction, but there are a lot of them out there, at least in our area here. The cracks often follow mortar joints in a stair. Scott, you just messed me up here while I was reading. Step pattern. Horizontal cracking can be more concerning, indicating lateral pressure. And then stone foundations, common in older homes, movement, mortar deterioration, bulging, moisture, and prior repairs are often more significant than individual cracks. Brick foundations, the cracks may follow the mortar joints just like block or pass through masonry units, just cutting right through them. Bulging, displacement, and deterioration are important concerns as well. And then slab foundations, cracks may be visible in concrete floors, garage slabs, basement slabs, or crawl space slabs related to shrinkage, settlement, or soil movement. Each foundation type presents unique crack patterns and concern levels. Knowing the foundation type helps frame your evaluation. So types of foundation cracks that we've all seen if we've been in the business for any length of time. So the vertical, shrinkage, or minor settlement. Don't forget and we're probably going to get to this later on in the webinar, but there's three big things to determine how a foundation holds up. First of all, are we curing that foundation properly after it's poured, if it's poured concrete? What type of soil have we put that foundation in? And you have to understand that we're putting a lot of weight on top of that foundation with the wood structure. So settlement cracks and shrinkage cracks are going to happen. I don't know. I don't take stats. I don't know how many foundations I have seen that had no cracking at all. I think probably a good percentage of them have some type of cracking. Diagonal cracks usually indicate some type of movement. Horizontal cracks indicate lateral pressure. Step cracking, masonry movement. Shrinkage is normal curing. And displacement, one side moved relative to the other. So they're in different locations. Also has a lot to do with what's going on and the soil conditions as well. And a lot of these cracks could have been caused during backfill. These guys go a little nuts. They might have a stump in the soil, pushing it against the house. That's still green material. So there's a lot of different reasons why you may see these things when you're doing your home inspection. Okay, Jim. So we have a little diagram here. We have some drainage outside, which is supposed to take the water away from the foundation, help keep the foundation dry, basement dry. The basement floor slab on top of some kind of process, at least in new construction. And some indications of some cracks here, a vertical crack at the wall, which they're listing as low severity in this picture. The horizontal crack is always a concern. Diagonal cracks at corners is where you would probably see them. They're medium severity. And then the basement floor cracks, 99% of the time, the basement slab is a separate pour, doesn't even need to be there. But if they get displaced, then repairs are needed. If the footings are moving, these cracks can also happen as well. So possible causes: concrete shrinkage during curing. It takes 28 days. Well, first of all, curing is not a dehydration process, it's a hydration process. There's got to be a certain amount of moisture in the concrete. If we let it dry out too fast, it's going to shrink. So we need to keep the moisture content in there for 28 to 30 days, or we might get these shrinkage cracks. Minor settlement or thermal movement, the construction-related stress, water pressure at weak points. So it's not unusual to have these cracks in newer foundations. Concern level: many narrow vertical cracks are not structurally significant if there's no displacement, bowing, or active water intrusion, but they can still allow water entry. When does concern increase? The width and displacement. The crack is wide or displaced. One side has shifted relative to the other. So I kind of run my fingers across these cracks. If I can catch them on a crack, then we know that there's been some movement. And of course, sometimes you don't even need to run your fingers. You'll see that right off the bat. And then automatically, that's a concern for me. Crack is wide or displaced. One side is shifted relative to the other. Cracks continue into framing or exterior veneers above the foundation. When I see a crack that I think is a concern, when I'm upstairs, I'm looking at if there's a window or door above it, if they're racked, there's cracking in the walls along with it. Usually I can't anticipate that because of the severity of the crack. Active leakage, evidence of water intrusion, staining, or efflorescence near the crack. And then the location and pattern: multiple cracks in the same area, near a corner, or near a concentrated load point. So you got to take all this into consideration when you're looking at these cracks. Okay, Jim.
Hey, Stan.
Yes.
When you're in a colonial, say, let's say it's 2,000 square foot, and you're in a basement unfinished, you see a vertical crack. There's no displacement. It's less than the thickness of a quarter. No efflorescence. Okay, not a serious problem. Do you have a number of cracks in mind as you start walking around that basement? Like, if you see 3, 4, from your experience, 38 years, like, do you hit a number where you're like, this is too many cracks?
I don't think I have an exact number, but if they start piling up, I do. But I also have to see the nature of them. Have they moved? Sometimes you'll also find other shoddy work, which would lead me to believe that maybe they didn't cure that foundation properly. You know what? I'm going to throw this out there. I don't know if anybody's ever watched NCIS and Leroy Jethro Gibbs. He used his gut to make decisions. After all these years, my gut tells me stuff. Sometimes you just know something is going on, but sometimes that's not enough. You can't report on my gut says. So you still have to put a narrative together and explain to people why you're concerned. Well, yeah, if there's a bunch of them, yes, of course, I'm concerned.
And to add to that, Stan, even though, Jim, you said there's no indications of seepage, but, a year later, 2 years, 5 years, they can start to leak. They can open up even wider. So, you just can't look at, all crack has a potential to leak as far as I'm concerned. If it's below grade or partially below, it could leak. You might see a little staining, efflorescence towards the bottom. So where you get in trouble is if you really, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. I always make note of it, and in my narrative, I'll say something to have somebody who specializes in analysis and repair to come out and take a look at, because those cracks can be sealed several different ways. There's several companies, whether it's epoxy ejection or the way Larry Janeski does it, with this membrane he puts over it and then puts a hole and it drains down in there. But the thing where you get in trouble is when they start to leak and water gets in, especially if they finish the basement. But if you make note of it, don't just blow it off. And chances are it's not a big deal. The house isn't going to fall down. It's not displaced. It's just a vertical crack. And Jim, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I start to see a lot of them, then I start wondering, when did they pour them? You don't even know, but they could have put too much water to try to get it all the way around. It could have been done in the wintertime. Sometimes we've seen it, Stan. I think you had a guy one time where you could take your screwdriver. I've had foundations where you put your screwdriver and they're really soft, and you see a lot of cracking because it just was a soft mix. They didn't have enough Portland cement. It's not our job to figure out why. Just let the customer know, the client know. So if something happens, it's in the report, it's documented, because every crack can seep water, no matter what. I mean, at some point or another, and there might just be a little bit. You get a certain storm, the gutter's not right, it's overflowing, and it hit in that area, and then it leaks next year, and they're calling you up and saying, you never told me that these could leak, and I should have done something about them. So just make sure you document, and if you want something, I'll give it to you.
Scott brought up a funny situation. That house, if I kept on digging, I would have dug right outside through that foundation, and these people didn't buy it. And about a month and a half later, I get an inspection call for the same house. So I asked for the disclosures, and they did disclose it. They just said possible foundation problem. So I told a guy on the phone before we went, and he said he wanted to do the inspection. And when we went through it all, him and his buddy were there, and they said, "Oh, we're going to put a brand new foundation wall within inside of this basement." So I'm not going to argue with him about what he's going to do. He just, he's well aware of the problem, and I'm not sure that's the right way to fix it, but he still wanted to buy the house. So, you do your job, and whatever happens after. And I told anybody that's been to several of our webinars knows my motto: if you protect yourself from liability, you're looking out for your client as well. So you protect yourself, your client's covered. If they want to go forward and buy the house, they buy the house. So diagonal cracks, differential settlement, soil movement or poor drainage, frost pressure or tree root influence, uneven loading or footing movement. Some of these things may not be evident right away. You're not going to see footing movement, but sometimes if the whole corner of a house has shifted, that might be the first thing you think of. But again, it's not our job to tell people what happened or what may be happening. You could say something, but you don't want to be married to it if it's something else or something that was more difficult to repair. So you got to choose your words. That's when you would have somebody come in and do further investigation. So diagonal cracks deserve careful attention because they may indicate that one area of the foundation is moving differently than another. And it happens. If your perimeter drainage is not working right and it's leaking out of the corner and undermining the footing, that could settle. Increased concern when crack is wider at one end, extends from window or door openings, associated with floor sloping or sticking doors, if the crack is displaced or offset. So again, when you get upstairs, if you got a crack in the front left corner of the house, walk that room. Is the floor following it? Are the windows in that corner racked? Does it look like poor carpentry installation, or does it look like the house is settled? There's going to be something else there if it's significant. Okay, Jim. So diagonal cracks, related signs: differential settlement, soil movement or poor drainage, frost pressure or tree root influence, uneven loading, as we said before. Diagonal cracks deserve, look at this. So this is not offset on the cracks itself, but there's two cracks here. So something has moved or shifted there, causing it. So I want to know if it's square across the top here or not, or level, if that's settled or not. But how far are you going to want to go? You're going to pull out your 4-foot level if you have one. So they do again deserve careful attention because they indicate that one area, the foundation, might be moving differently. But I think you're going to be able to see it as well for the most part. Again, sticking doors and windows, sloping floors, cracked drywall. That's what you should be looking for after you see a crack that you're concerned with. If there's, you go outside and look at the siding, the brick or the trim showing relative movement, butt joints popped on siding in that area. These are even outside if it's just really wet. If it's wet outside and there's water pressure, could create problems. Trees close to the house with the roots pushing against a foundation. So it's if these things start to pile up, this kind of evidence piles up, then maybe it's a bigger issue than you may have thought initially. But it's not just, oh, the crack is good or the crack is bad. You got to look at other things. For me, the lateral crack is the most critical. So when you have a crack going across, and most of these, they could be bowed, right? So if you had that level, or even a piece of wood, and it's rocking back and forth across that crack, there has been some movement. Okay, now, is the movement going to continue? Did that movement happen when they backfilled? Who knows? Sometimes you can't even ask the homeowner. It might have only been there 5 years. Well, it's been like that since we found out in our home inspection. And it hasn't changed. Well, maybe it hasn't. And, but you
bags I left over there by the coffee maker, that's to put food in afterwards, okay?
Go ahead, Stan.
Okay. So, lateral or hydrostatic soil pressure could cause this as well, but it would be quite a bit. In expansive soils, when they heave, they're putting a lot of pressure against the foundation. The poor drainage, clogged. Early on, they didn't use any cloth on the footing drains, and they would get plugged up, and then the water would accumulate, and there'd be pressure. Heavy loads or vehicle pressure near the wall can cause that as well. During construction, putting addition on a house. So a lot of things are taken into consideration. Horizontal cracks may indicate inward wall movement, and concrete block walls, horizontal cracks along mortar joints can be a warning sign of bowing or lateral pressure, often more concerning than vertical shrinkage cracks. So that's a big one. You don't need the codes if you're watching live, no. Horizontal cracks, high concern conditions, wall bowing inward. I mean, in that picture, you can actually see it. That's a good picture, a good depiction of it. It's opened up quite a bit in that center picture. And that's not something you're going to, even if there's no leakage there, that's not something you're going to mortar up and say it's all fixed. And then water coming through the brick wall there in a horizontal fashion.
Hey, Stan, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So I've been seeing over the years I see a lot of this with the block CMUs, either cinder or cement masonry units, and from hydrostatic pressure, like you said, when they backfilled. But I've been seeing these contractors putting bands on and running from the top sill down to the floor and giving a guarantee that those bands that they put on are just a thin strip.
Yeah.
And they say that, those will never move. What's your experience with that?
I haven't seen them personally. And, I don't care what we're talking about. If it's a new procedure, a new material, it's got to be tried and true for me to really feel comfortable with it. Just like plastic piping, copper's been tried and true. Now we're bringing in plastic, and every form of plastic has had an issue of some sort. So I really haven't seen that perform long enough to feel that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. But yes, that's becoming a kind of popular repair. And but like I said, I have never seen one up close and personal. I've just seen pictures and stories about them. So I would be skeptical, to be honest with you. There's not enough. I don't think there's enough information on them or history personally, but that's me. That's me. And I would caution people if I see that, find out who put it up, find out the warranty, what they're going to do if there's issues that continue. I love it when people are confident, but that's also a good salesperson too. So this is another common crack that I see a lot. I think we all do. The step cracking. It could range from moderate to significant, depending on the width, displacement, wall movement, and location. The pattern itself is a clue. It follows the path of least resistance through the mortar joints, often indicating masonry movement or settlement. So you could, that if that's bowed or offset, you'd be able to tell perhaps water coming in, but I just think these types of things, if you're concerned about them, need a follow-up. We're talking about the structure of the house right now. If the crack is wider than a hairline, because don't forget the mortar could shrink as well. Blocks or masonry units are displaced. That's when I kick into high gear. The wall is bowed or leaning, also concern. Cracks extend through multiple courses, visible on both interior and exterior. The mortar is deteriorated, relative movement visible above the foundation. There's no way to know if that's is continuing or not. I don't care if the people were there for 20 years and they don't think it's changed, because they don't know. Have they monitored it? Have they I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, I used to see these little crack, what do they call them? Crack monitors. They were like an X, and you'd put them on a crack and it would tell you how wide it is. And you come back 6 months later and see if it moved. They were all over the place. People were selling those to monitor cracks. That's the only way you're going to tell if this is moving. Somebody's got to be monitoring it. Shrinkage cracks. They're usually normal concrete curing process, part of the process, indicating rapid drying or maybe an improper mix, the lack of control joints, especially if it's in a big footprint slab, thermal contraction. So they're narrow, width, often vertical or random in pattern, usually no displacement, often appears shortly after construction, and may not indicate structural movement. So if you're new, you may not.
Where is my dessert?
What's that?
Can you guys have to mute yourself? Thank you.
You may not be comfortable with those cracks, even though they may not be big issues. So you have to, be comfortable with making the call by knowing the characteristics, and you can develop a language, especially if it's a newer construction, where you may have to watch it for a while because it is new and these are normal characteristics of concrete after it's poured. You don't have any idea who poured that concrete and how it was done and how it was cured. So these are the kind of things, if we have a broken floor joist is broken, got to be fixed. This is a little different. We don't get a chance to come back and look at that. We have to make a good call during the inspection and in our report. So displacement cracks are pretty obvious, right? All these things have had significant movement. Sometimes they're not a big issue, but most of the time they're going to be. And at least recommending some type of evaluation and repair, even if it's repairable. Somebody's been in there looking at it and determined that, made that repair, and it's off your plate at that point. But any movement like wall section leaning or bowing, that looks like it's probably above grade. This one, cracked edges not aligned. I'd want to try and figure out for myself. There's nothing above that, nothing on the other side there in the wall. And what is that behind there? Is that brick? Is that a veneer? So you kind of look at all that stuff and try and inside, I'd want to know, does it look as bad inside? Does it look like some of that damage is occurring or cracking is occurring inside? Slab cracks. Slab cracks may be visible in basements, garages, crawl spaces, or living areas. Evaluating displacement, moisture, and proximity to load-bearing elements helps determine whether the slab crack is a cosmetic concern or a sign of more significant movement below. So let's start with the garage. The garage is a common part of the house, depending on the property. A lot of times your street level may be a little bit higher, or your grade may push water against the garage. The water gets underneath that slab and undermines the slab, washes out some of the underlayment, and then you put your 3,000-pound car on it and it starts to crack. So the cracking itself is not an issue, but that if you start to displace that space that's getting washed out and the slab is being pushed down into it, it becomes a nuisance. It's not structural for the most part because these slabs are up against the footings of the garage, but it is a nuisance. I'm going to say 6 months ago, I had one where, Jesus, it must have been off by like 2-3 inches. Just not something you want to deal with all the time. So I told the guy, I said, this slab's got to be destroyed, taken out, and you got to compact the ground again and keep the water away from it and put a new slab in here, unless you want to, take a trip through the Rocky Mountains here. That's the way it looked. So that was a pretty big job, even though it wasn't a structural issue.
Stan, can I add something to that? What I see
Sure.
from the time is in basements and in garages, they put an overlay on to hide the cracks. They'll put 2 to 3 inches of concrete on there, and it's just crazy when you see it. And you can tell in the basement because the bottom stair stringer, the first step is now
It's
much
buried.
lower than it was originally. Or the base or the garage, in an old garage, the floor looks perfect. Like there's no tire tracks or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I know that's a bad thing. I know it's a bad thing to do. I'm just saying I've seen that though. That's one of the ways they've tried to put a Band-Aid on things.
yeah, Ed, we need to be aware of that in everything we do, right? That fix to get somebody out of a house that, maybe somebody who wasn't really qualified to do the job. They didn't fix anything. They just masked it. So if it's something that happens before we get there, we should be able to pick up on it. If it's something that happens because we made the call and it happens later, we're never going to know. But those things go on every single day. I could speak for Scott and Jim that we see that stuff a lot.
Oh yeah.
And it used to be 25 years ago, you used to tell somebody to have a roofer come in or somebody come in and check things out because they would get a price from the guy and they would use that number to negotiate. And then when the contractors started realizing they weren't getting any of the work, they would not be available or they charged. So the realtors, sorry, Gary, would surround themselves with people who would go in and just do anything they needed them to do to get them out of a house. So you got to be careful. So possible causes of slab cracks: shrinkage or poor compaction below the slab, settlement or frost heave, plumbing leaks below slab, expansive soil or tree roots, heavy loads. Hairline cracking, no displacement. You see that a lot. It's not a big deal. No moisture staining or tripping hazard. No related wall movement. You could tolerate that stuff. Vertical displacement or white cracks, on the other hand, are a concern. Uneven floors or moisture entry, cracks near columns or load-bearing areas, evidence of ongoing movement. And that, I think, at least in a garage, is kind of easy to see. Now, the same thing in a house too, but exact same reasons that it could happen. But so this says interior indicators, sloping floors. I've seen some pours that were not level. So it doesn't always mean that the floor has shifted. Sticking doors or windows, cracked drywall, gaps at trim or molding. Exterior indicators are exterior grading problems, downspout discharge near the foundation, retaining walls or driveways pushing towards the foundation, prior repairs or sealant visible. You know, the water issue is a big deal in a house in many, many different ways. And a lot of times correcting drainage around the house is going to fix a lot of other issues. You know, even gutters that are dumping water around the foundation, all that's got to be taken care of when you suspect a foundation or slab problem. Cracking up, evaluating the significance of a crack. Crack width. Hairline cracks are often less concerning than wide cracks, but width alone is not enough to determine severity. Crack direction, vertical, diagonal, horizontal, stair step, and random cracks each suggest different possible causes. Displacement, offset, bowing, leaning, or movement along a crack significantly increases concern level. Absolutely. Location, cracks near corners, beams, columns, openings, or concentrated loads may be more significant because now you're affecting a significant structural part of the house. Moisture evident, water staining, efflorescence, dampness, mold-like growth, or active leakage may indicate water intrusion. And multiple cracks in one area may suggest a larger movement pattern rather than isolated shrinkage. Age and foundation type. Older stone or brick foundations may show more movement, typical for age, but this does not mean all movement is acceptable. Again, you're going to have to know what you're looking at and make the call. At a glance, as we already discussed several times in this presentation, so lower concerns are the narrow width, no displacement, no moisture, stable pattern, and shrinkage related. Higher concerns would be wide cracks, displacement, present active moisture, horizontal block, bowing movement, and multiple cracks. So I don't know if those pictures depict that properly, but so if you're viewing this as a pre-recorded webinar, the code is VHS8281. And if you're viewing this today live, there's no need to record these. Foundation cracks may carry several important implications beyond their visible appearance. Understanding these implications helps the inspector communicate findings with appropriate weight, neither overstating or minimizing concern. Foundation cracks are not automatically considered structural defects. Some cracks may be related to normal concrete shrinkage, settlement, curing, age, and minor movement. Other cracks indicate more significant concern. Okay, Jim, I'm not going to repeat all that stuff again.
Okay.
Water intrusion. Even non-structural cracks can allow water entry. I think one of the biggest concerns ahead of time that a lot of my clients have is water issues. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's coming from a crack. It could be coming from anywhere, but they are always concerned when they see water. And 9 out of 10 times they've been in that house before us, so they already got an idea what's going on. So now you look around and you're going to see if this is just hydrostatic pressure, poor drainage outside, or do we have cracking that's allowing the water to come in? Can we fix that crack to stop the water? Is that crack a structural issue? Because water can damage finishes, personal property, insulation framing, affect indoor air quality, even when the crack itself is not structurally significant. So it's kind of important the water is an issue no matter what. Cracks may indicate soil movement, settlement, frost pressure, or lateral pressure. A one-time visual inspection cannot always determine whether movement is active or historic. Cracks with displacement, bowing, or wall movement may affect the foundation's ability to support loads or resist soil pressure. And the foundation may still be standing but have functional concerns, leakage, uneven floors, sticking doors, or difficulty finishing basement areas. So that's the same thing with an older basement. And, you know, you get a little bit of water coming in when there's significant rain. But that, unless you fix that, you can't use that basement sometimes the way you want to, unless you stop that water. And then you may find out it's a potential structural issue too. So don't minimize anything when you're evaluating and reporting. Cost of negotiation. Foundation cracks often affect buyers' confidence, insurance questions, financing approvals, and repair negotiations, even when the structural concern is limited. Severe movement, leaning walls, extensive displacement, or compromised support should be treated as significant and referred for future evaluation without delay. Safety level concerns, leaning walls, extensive displacement, compromised support must always be referred. Always. Communicating with your client. Foundation cracks require careful communication. Clients may be alarmed quickly, especially if they hear words like structural, settlement, foundation failure. The inspector's goal is clarity, not drama, and not dismissal. So we're not there to sugarcoat the crack. We're not there to scare the bejesus out of these people. We really should try to put everything into perspective, because in the perfect world, you should be able to negotiate something like this, correct it, and you can buy the house because that's why you were there. You were interested in the house. Be clear, not dramatic. Avoid overstating the condition unless the evidence supports it. Balanced language builds trust. It also makes you look more experienced and smarter because you're taking everything in stride. You're not jumping up and down. Look what I found. This is a problem. Put everything into perspective, and you just look better at what you do. Do not dismiss the condition. Even common cracks should be reported if visible. Omission creates liability, for sure. You know, even if they're little hairline cracks, shrinkage cracks that you think aren't an issue, take a couple pictures, put them in your report that you saw them, and that you should be monitoring them for additional cracking just to be on the safe side. Explain what was seen. Describe the crack type, location, approximate size, if appropriate, and related conditions observed. Explain possible implications. Use balanced language, may indicate, can be associated with, or could all allow water entry. And I think that's the type of language we should use with everything, because we don't know what's going to happen after we leave. So you recommend the appropriate actions. For minor cracks, monitoring and sealing may be appropriate. For cracks with movement, water entry, or displacement, recommend further evaluation. Stay within the scope. Do not determine engineering adequacy unless properly qualified. The inspector's role is observation and reporting. Avoid guarantees. Never make absolute statements about a crack's past, present, or future. I'm going to throw in a real quick story. One of my old interns who was in business for a while on his own, in Monroe, Connecticut, there's a part of a condo complex that had soil problems, a lot of settlement in a couple of the buildings. He didn't know that going in. He found all the cracks in this condo were marked and were being monitored. He saw them. He put them in a report. He didn't know the ramifications at that time. To make a long story short, the issues came out that the association knew and the realtors knew, and that he didn't, even though he pointed it out. And among other mistakes that he may have made with the reporting process and getting his agreement signed and stuff like that, he was sued and had to go to court and had to pay a large sum of money. So how would he have known that was going on prior to? I don't think every inspector in the state of Connecticut knew about that. He reported on it, and he still got his butt in trouble. So what we do is, we're sticking our butt on the line every single day. And we have to be very, very succinct and accurate with what we say and what we report on. So what not to say: avoid these statements. This crack is not a problem. This will never leak. The foundation is structurally sound. This crack has been there forever. No repairs are needed. Better wording would be no significant displacement was visible at the time of inspection. The crack appears minor, but should be monitored. Further evaluation is recommended due to displacement, bowing, water staining. The inspection was visual and not technically exhaustive. So reporting language example. Good inspection narratives include 4 components, as you have heard us say before: observation, implication, recommendation, and limitation. They don't have to be done in separate sentences. They could be kind of in one sentence. The following examples demonstrate how to apply this structure to common foundation crack findings. The foundation appeared to be in good condition for its age. A crack was observed in the foundation. The wall surfaces on both sides of the crack appeared even, with no visible displacement noted at the time of inspection. The crack was narrow, measuring less than the thickness of a quarter. Cracks of this type are commonly associated with normal settlement, shrinkage, and/or related movement. No significant structural displacement was observed at the visible portion of the crack during the inspection. However, cracks can allow moisture entry and should be monitored for any further future widening, movement, or water seepage. Recommend sealing, filling the cracks as a preventative maintenance measure, and monitoring if periodically for changes. If the crack widens, becomes displaced, shows significant signs of water intrusion, or if additional cracking develops, further evaluation by a qualified foundation contractor or structural specialist is recommended. See the pictures in the report for the location, and the foundation inspection was limited to visible and accessible areas only. Structural components concealed behind finished surfaces, stored items, insulation, exterior grading, or other obstructions could not be inspected. Engineering or architectural services, including calculations of structural capacity, adequacy, or integrity, are beyond the scope of the standard home inspection. Stay right here for a minute, Jim. So this is a big paragraph, no matter if you found a crack or not, especially if that basement's finished. There have been home inspectors, at least here in Connecticut, that indicated that the basement had finished material, and the inspection was limited. People took ceiling material off, wall material off for some reason, and found issues behind the walls. Maybe not foundation problems, but electrical, mold, whatever. And the judge said that he should have at least had a paragraph in there telling them what may be behind there and what they could find. And as soon as I heard that story, and again, this is the benefit of hanging out with a bunch of home inspectors at a meeting, because you hear these kind of stories, and I went right home and put that paragraph in my inspection report. So just because we indicate the limitations of inspection doesn't mean it's another hurdle, but people can still go after you even though you said that. And Scott and I believe in repetitiveness. It's in the agreement. It's in the I call it prelude to my inspection report. Someday I'm going to show you all the stuff, half of my report that's in there for liability purposes. It's in there 3 or 4 times, but specific to foundations as well when I get to that part, whether I find a crack or not, because things can be lurking behind that we're not going to see. Okay, Jim. So when to refer for further evaluation. I think there's going to be a point, we probably all have that point right now, to where we've, like Jim said, too many cracks, what's going on here? Or that crack's too wide, or there's a lot of offset in that crack, the wall's bowed. You have to refer somebody else to come in there. You can't walk away feeling like, okay, we're good, that's not going to move. So horizontal cracks, bowing walls, displacement, or conditions suggesting lateral pressure or settlement. Significant displacement, wall movement, leaning, or any condition that may affect load-bearing capacity. Active leakage, water staining, efflorescence, or cracks associated with moisture intrusion. We have 2 or 3 other webinars that we've done in the past that are kind of tied to this. And you may want to go back and go through them again, because they all kind of interlock together. The soil conditions outside, the properties of wood, all the things that make houses crack and move, They're not all significant issues, but it's good to know them and factor them in when you're looking at something that you are concerned about that may be a structural issue. So inspector scope review, what you are and are not expected to do. So within the scope, we observe and document visible conditions. We identify and describe crack type, location, and characteristics. Note related conditions, so moisture displacement related movement. Communicate possible implications. Recommend further evaluation when appropriate. Outside of the scope of the inspection, we are not performing engineering analysis, determine the exact cause of movement, predict future performance, determine engineering adequacy, guarantee structural soundness. You know, engineers, without putting numbers together and taking measurements. One of my interns, while he was training, was with me at a house, and the center of the slab looks like it heaved upwards, and along the back of the house was a crack from wall to wall and the front, not quite as bad. And they knew, the buyers knew about it, and they told me we have an engineer coming down. So I made my evaluation. I made my speech about it, and I said, it's hard to tell what's going on here. Could have had a heave. Maybe it was built like this. Something has changed here. And that's what I was going to put in a report. So we kind of hung around the basement and looked at the boiler while the engineer was there. And, almost word for word, he said the same thing. And $350, please. So I don't put much stock into just an engineer coming down. They're not going to calculate any more information than we are. Just keep that in mind. It's not the end all that they were there. They're going to recommend further, number crunching and things like that to determine what the correction, excavation, look at the footing. There's so many things that may need to be seen to determine what's going on. We just need to steer people to that, or not. It's a little tricky. The longer you've been in this business, I think the easier it will be for you to be able to tell.
Yeah, but Stan, isn't that just another layer of protection for us?
Yes. You know what, Ed, I've changed. That was you, Ed, right?
Yes.
I don't know who I was talking to the other. Somebody that we were on the board with the Connecticut Association of Home Inspectors called me yesterday checking in on us, and he's got 25 years in. I'm going to try and get to 40. We were talking, and I said, there's so many things I used to do when I first started I don't do anymore. As soon as I see something wrong with something, I just kind of nip it in the bud. And if I feel it's got to be repaired, replaced, or evaluated, I don't need to write 6 paragraphs to get to that anymore. I've eliminated a lot of the work that I used to do that wasn't really necessary. But as I said, half my report are layers of limiting liability. They may jump over the first 15 hurdles, but one of them is going to be a little higher and they're not going to get over it. It's just the way it's got to be. I don't care if you have insurance or not. You don't even want to use that. We should be able to write and protect ourselves before you even get to that point. So that's my feeling. After 38 years, I'm still in business. People are still referring me. So at least for me, I've been doing something right. So closing summary, ladies and gentlemen, foundation cracks should be evaluated based on type, location, width, displacement, moisture evidence, and related movement. Many cracks are common and may not represent serious structural concerns, but others can indicate settlement, lateral pressure, water intrusion, or ongoing movement. The most important role of the home inspector is to document the visible condition, communicate the possible implications, and recommend further evaluation when appropriate. Clear, balanced language protects the client, reduces confusion, and keeps the inspector within the proper scope of visual home inspection. So that applies to everything we do. Final takeaway, not every foundation crack is a structural failure, but every visible foundation crack deserves thoughtful evaluation, clear reporting, and appropriate client communication. So you consider the type, width, and those characteristics, report those characteristics clearly as what makes you concerned about the crack, and then refer when needed to somebody who can take that to the next level and figure out what's going on there. All right, it's not an easy process, but I'd rather see you mess up on a leaky faucet than a foundation. So
Stan,
yes,
one of the cracking that we didn't go through, I know we got a couple more minutes left, is the crumbling foundation issue. So we're called map cracking. We didn't put it in this webinar because it really probably deserves its own webinar. And
correct.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking into doing a 1-hour webinar on crumbling foundation. I just have to make sure I can get it approved in all the states. If you're in Connecticut, one of the things I can tell you about it, though, we all know it's roughly 1980 to 2016. Some people say 83 to 2016. But in Connecticut, if you have a house that you're purchasing, say it's from 2000, and you do not get an engineer to look at that house and write a report who's authorized to do crumbling foundation inspections, you pay the $400, you'll get reimbursed that. But if you do not do that and you close on the property, that house therefore is opted out of the state reimbursement program or the fund to help with that. So that's one of the things too. I know I put in my reports, if I'm in an area where I think there could be crumbling foundation, if it's in that part of the state, I put that comment in there just to say, you may consider. I do that even prior when I'm on the phone. I'll look up the house and I'll say, listen, you're up in the quiet corner there. The house was built in 1995. When you're walking through, did you see any cracking? Do we have any disclosures or anything like that? And you may consider getting an engineer on that, going out there and looking at that, so that if there is problems in the future, you can get into that fund to get reimbursement.
Could add to that, Jim.
Sure.
Just to tell all our members, is any map cracking, whether it's AAR, any map cracking you see, that could be a potential concern, because there's other reasons why a foundation could have all that map cracking or spider cracking. And like Jim and Stan and I, we've been doing this a long time, and even before this all came out, you saw map cracking every once in a while. What was it? AAR? Was it the alkaline aggregate reaction, or was it just because of other reasons too? And you drive around, you look at all these bridges in Connecticut, and you see a lot of map cracking. And I'm sure you see it in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. So, it's not our job to determine, and even that could be hard too. Core samples aren't 100% when they do that, because one wall could be good and the other wall could be bad. And so any map cracking I see, we always see a little spider cracking on the floor slabs and everything. Could be too much water, they overworked it. But still, you gotta point it out. Could be a problem. And
100%.
I hope we can.
So
we could
go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry.
Hope we can a seminar on that, because just that alone could take a couple hours.
Yeah, 100%. So we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. September 1st, we've got attic ventilation. And then September 8th, we have a special event. It's for New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island inspectors. It's a 2-day event, September 8th and 9th, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We're going to have breaks, so don't worry, on report writing. And you can earn 4 credits. So that's exciting. We have September 15th, thermostats and zones, how they work. And you can go to our calendar events. One of our exciting events for, if you're a Connecticut inspector, this is the last period in the licensing cycle that you can get your law credit. We're doing an in-person law seminar, 3 hours, January 6th in Seymour, Connecticut, at Basement Systems of Connecticut. The information's on the website, and we are sending out emails for registration. There is a cost to that. It is $99, but we will have food and prizes, and it's a real nice facility down there. So again, this is the last if you're not in this licensing cycle, 25 to 27, if you have a Connecticut license, this is the last chance to get your law credit. So,
Did
which
you
is
have an
required.
electronic one before, or a Zoom one before?
We do. We have that. We're putting that on pause until January 7th because we want people to go to we like to see people in person on this one.
Yeah, but I mean, that's far for me. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I was
Okay, yeah,
asking.
we will have that after our in person. Yes, we'll make that live again so that
Okay,
you
good.
can.
That's good.
purchase
So
that.
I'll be attending that one. I thought we had one, or you just did the mass one. Maybe that
We
was
did
it.
the math. Yeah, we did the mass one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we have a Connecticut one that's approved that you can watch as a pre-recorded event, but that's not going to be available till after January 7th.
Okay. So I'll be covered. I'll be no problem.
You'll be
Okay.
covered.
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless you want to come and see us in person, I would love to meet you in person.